and welcome to Nocturnal Transmissions, the fortnightly podcast that brings you dark tales, both old and new, performed by your humble narrator, Kristin Holland. We do hope you enjoyed our last offering, Aaron Flex, Al-Kitab al-Ghul, being the singular memoir of Ibn al-Warith, the only known son of Abdul al-Hazred, called the Mad Arab by some. It was more story than a single episode could hope to contain, hence our two-part presentation. The proverbial certainly hits the fan in the second half, does it not, gentle listener? This episode's feature stands in stark contrast to Al-Kitab. However, there is a theme here that ties the two together. I can't say what that theme is, though, gentle listener, because, well, spoilers. Oh, perhaps I've said too much already. I tell you what, forget everything I've said. Let's meet our new acolytes, then we'll get down to the business of our grim tale. We are feeling very fortunate to be joined by no less than 6 new Patreon acolytes since last we spoke. These magnificent creatures are Anna Bausar, Nutsy, good dog Nutsy, good dog. Hobo Cannibal, sounds like you're our kind of person, Hobo. Verdolento! It's all in caps, so I guess that's how you gotta say it. Nauda. And my white van has free Wi-Fi. Creepy. If you'd like to join My White Van Has Free Wi-Fi and their associates in supporting our humble production through Patreon, please go ahead. Those regular exclusive bonus Patreon subscriber episodes aren't going to listen to themselves, you know. Go to patreon.com/Nocturnal Transmissions. Now, burying the lead, as I am wont to do, we are very excited to announce a new cohort in our midst. Cohort is the highest rank amongst our faithful clergy. Our latest esteemed cohort is... Please imagine a drum roll in your heads here, gentle listener. We didn't have the budget to put it in ourselves. Barry Jones. Welcome, Barry. Welcome. Now, burying the lead under a buried lead, as it will presently appear that I am also wont to do, we also have an executive cohort who has magnanimously decided to extend their largesse to us. Remember that time when I said that cohort was the highest rank amongst our beloved patrons? Well, that wasn't entirely true. There is a tier above reserved for those whose generosity and passion for the macabre knows no bounds. We doff our hats to our previous executive cohort, Sanitarium Magazine. Although they are no longer patrons of Nocturnal Transmissions, they remain good friends of the show. And just to give you a little bit of inside information, gentle listener, we can inform you that another edition of this only occasional magazine is currently in the works. We'll keep you posted of further developments. However, enough about them. Let's meet our new executive cohort. It's Eugene Petrie. Now you see him, now you don't. And then you do again. Eugene was with us briefly as a cohort before being called away to save the world or some such carry-on, and now he has returned bigger and better than ever. Welcome, Eugene. You are certainly full of surprises. All right, I'll bet you're all getting sick of the sound of my voice. Let's hear another one. Nocturnal Transmissions is proud to present Rory Says Winter.
Though it was a while until winter, we woke to snow. Colin was the first to see it. I was still half dreaming when he shouted from the kitchen that it was snowing outside, and so it was easy to tell myself that his words weren't real. But when he ran back into our bedroom shouting over and over again what he'd shouted from the kitchen, I got up on my knees and peeled apart the blinds of the window beside me. And then I saw that it was true. Snow was falling from a deep grey sky that seemed to hang just over the roofs of the houses around us. It must have started some time ago, because already a sooty layer covered everything I could see out the window. I had to look at it for a while before I could believe it. When I turned around, I saw Dad inside the doorway. His hair was standing up and his eyes were red and wide, looking past me, over me, as though he could still see out the window, even though I'd taken my fingers from the blinds. I asked him what was wrong, and he pretended not to hear, just kept staring over my shoulder. Then he told Colin to stop shouting and told both of us to keep it down because Mom wasn't feeling well. I asked him again what was wrong, this time referring to Mom, but he had already left the room and closed the door behind him. Colin crawled up on my bed and raised the blinds. The snow that was everywhere looked old and dirty, like the kind that ends up piled in mounds on the side of the road. Even though it had to be fresh, it was the first snow I'd seen in a few years. I slid the window open a crack and stuck my arm outside. The air was warm on my bare skin, warmer even than in our bedroom. I waited until a snowflake fell into my hand, and then I brought my arm back in. Colin leaned in close, and we both studied the snowflake. It was about the size of a moth, and it looked like a withered shred of burnt paper. Colin asked if it was cold, and I told him no. Then I closed my hand into a fist, and when I opened it, the snowflake had disappeared into the tiniest bits of nothing. We both looked at each other. I could see questions in Colin's face, but he didn't ask me anything because I think he saw the same questions in my face. We put our backs to the window and sat for a moment on the side of my bed, both thinking about the snow behind us, outside. We spent the morning reading in our room. There wasn't much else to do. Mom and Dad hadn't let us watch any TV for the past while. They said all the kids' shows were taking a break, and even they only watched their grown-up shows after we'd gone to bed. Lately, Mom had been reading us one of the Roald Dahl books we kept on a shelf in the hallway, but since she was sick, I had to take over. I was never able to understand anything I read aloud. It was like I was sounding out words in a language that made no sense. This meant that I needed to read every page back to myself once I'd read it out to Colin, which ended up taking a long time. At some point we heard a noise from the living room and went out to find Dad carrying the TV away from its stand in the corner. He still hadn't had a shower, and his hair was all over the place. He paused when he saw us and said that the TV wasn't working. I asked him for the third time that morning what was wrong. And for the third time he gave me the same answer of silence before disappearing back into his bedroom. An hour later we had finished the BFG and taken The Witches off the shelf, but I'd barely begun to read from it when we heard the sound of Mom crying. Colin's eyes found mine, and a second later we were banging on Mom and Dad's bedroom door, shouting things we wanted to know. The door opened and Dad was there. His face was awful. It hardly looked like Dad's face at all. Behind him I could see Mom in bed, her head propped up by pillows, her face wet with tears. It looked awful too. Dad told us that everything was all right. Mom just needed some rest. I asked him if she was sick because of the snow, and he only looked at me like he didn't understand what I'd said, his eyes blank and his mouth a bit open. Then Mom said from behind him that she'd be okay, she'd be out to see us in a while. Her voice didn't sound like she would be okay. We looked at her until Dad closed the door on us, and then we looked at each other and went back into our room. None of the clocks worked either. We had Colin's watch to go by, but it didn't seem to make much difference what time it was. Outside was like the scene inside a snow globe, only one that was colourless. And though we kept looking out our bedroom window every few minutes, we'd stopped discussing what was there. When we got hungry, we went and told Dad through his bedroom door. He came in a while later with a tray of crackers and cheese and nuts and 2 glasses of milk that wasn't cold. He watched us as we ate, huddled on my bed underneath the window because the light wasn't working. Then he sat down on Colin's bed and began telling us about the snow. He said there was a big storm somewhere far away that was so powerful that it collected up all the little bits of dust and dirt and turned them into papery flakes. And even though this storm was far away, he explained slowly, all those little things it picked up had travelled over to us in the clouds. Colin asked if the storm would come to us, and Dad took a while to answer, finally saying, "No, we didn't need to worry." I was up on my knees and looking out the window as he told us these things. The snow put a funny feeling into me, like I was looking at something I wasn't supposed to see. Turning back toward the room, I asked Dad if this was why school had closed down, and he said no, school was closed because the teachers were on a strike, which meant they wanted more money. We all fell quiet for a while. There were more questions I wanted to ask about the snow, but I didn't. The fear I felt as I looked at that grey portion of the world was something I couldn't put my finger on. I hated to look at it, but when I wasn't looking, I wanted to. Later, Mom came out and we lit candles that she had placed around the living room. Her face looked sore from crying, but she told us when we asked that she didn't want to talk about it. She'd tell us later. Dad sat in a chair by the big front window, rubbing his fingers into his whiskers and turning now and then to peer behind the curtains. We ate a meal of bread with peanut butter and sliced bananas and more cheese and crackers. Mom kept reaching out to squeeze our hands and tell us that she loved us and was proud of us and that she was so glad we were all together. For some reason, hearing her say these things frightened me in the same strange way as looking out the window at the snow. Colin said he loved her back as he played with his food. Dad was quiet and didn't eat anything. Afterwards, Mom read to us by candlelight on the couch in the living room, picking up where Colin and I had left off in The Witches. But I found it hard to concentrate on the story. Mom's voice sounded shaky and dry, not like her usual reading voice, and she kept needing to clear her throat and get up to refill her glass of water. I was also distracted every time Dad turned in his chair to look out the curtains, which Mom insisted be kept drawn. Soon Colin began to yawn and stretch his arms, and then he was asleep with his head in Mom's lap. Dad got up to take him to our room, but Mom said, "No, leave him. He's fine where he is." Dad hesitated, then sat back down. None of us spoke or looked at each other for what felt like a long time. We all looked at Colin. His small head, his bent legs. Then Mom reached over and stroked my hair and told me I was very brave. I didn't know what to say, so said nothing. All I could think about was the snow just behind the curtains. But I didn't say anything about that either. We sat there in the living room long into the night, the candles glowing and diminishing around us, dripping liquid wax onto the coasters we'd placed under them. Colin shifted in his sleep and made small, cat-like sounds. Watching him made me tired, and finally I sank down to put my own head next to his. When we both woke at some point in the night, it was only for a few seconds.
Winter by Rory Say. Mr. Say is the wordsmith behind Heaven Unearthed, which we featured in episode 63. I'm sure you'll agree it's been too long between drinks, as they say. My oh my, we certainly have been on a bit of an apocalyptic bender of late, haven't we, gentle listener? I do hope we haven't knocked too much stuffing out of you with these grim end-of-the-world narratives. You know what might help if you need a little cheering up? You could watch the new animated feature film, The Mitchells vs. the Machines. Certainly in keeping with our current theme, it's about an apocalypse. A robot apocalypse, not to put too fine a point on it. But this charming tale will do nothing but bring you joy. Brought to you by the same forces behind the Lego Movie and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. How could it do otherwise? Now, this isn't really typical of the dark fare we tend to recommend to you in our world-famous Nocturnal Transmissions Recommends segments. But nevertheless, if you need a little, well, post-apocalyptic palate cleanser, this'll do the trick. It's available on Netflix. Shall we do it? Oh, why not? The Mitchells vs. the Machines. Nocturnal Transmissions recommends it. This episode was brought to you with the assistance of our Patreon subscribers. A particular thank you goes out to our esteemed cohorts: Matt Ruprecht, Rachel Brown, Adam, JB, Shell, Alicia Townsend, Stephanie Saloka, Alex Brewis, Chris McCauley, Robert Troy Hampton Peterson, Evan Dooley, Michael Wood, Sam Bell, and our new cohort, Barry Jones, and, of course, our executive cohort, Eugene Petrie. All non-public domain stories are featured with the permission of the authors. All voices and production are concocted by Kristin Holland. Until next we meet, as always, watch the skies, fear the dark, and don't trust anyone, especially yourself. Good night, gentle listener.